The millionaire's daughters cried endlessly, untouched by wealth or luxury. Doctors, nannies, and therapists failed one by one. Then came a street cleaner, unnoticed, who simply sang. What happened next shattered every expectation and every wall. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching us from. We continue. I promise that this will be the best story you will hear in your life. In the exclusive neighborhood of Westfield Heights, where perfectly manicured lawns framed imposing facades, Maxwell Bennett's mansion stood as an architectural marvel. Yet, despite its grandeur, the $15 million estate had become a prison of sorrow. The once vibrant home now echoed with the relentless crying of twin baby girls, Sophia and Olivia, just 10 months old. Maxwell, a 38-year-old tech entrepreneur whose financial software company had revolutionized Wall Street, sat in his study with bloodshot eyes, staring blankly at family photos. Since losing his wife, Jennifer, to a sudden illness 3 months ago, he had been drowning in grief while desperately trying to comfort his daughters. Their cries filled every room, every corridor, every moment, a constant reminder of what they had lost. "Mr. Bennett, I've tried everything," said Natalie, the latest nanny to resign. She stood in the doorway, her designer uniform pristine, but her composure fractured. "I've worked with difficult children before, but the twins, they just won't stop crying. I've consulted with pediatricians, child psychologists." "I understand," Maxwell interrupted, his voice hollow. "You're the 5th nanny this month. I'll have your final payment processed immediately." After Natalie left, Maxwell approached the nursery where the twins' wails intensified. Prescription bottles lined the changing table, sleep aids, mild sedatives, all recommended by top specialists, all failing to soothe the inconsolable infants. The finest pediatricians in the country had examined them, finding no physical ailments. The most expensive child psychologists had observed them, suggesting emotional trauma from losing their mother. Maxwell had followed every instruction, tried every technique, spent hundreds of thousands of dollars, all for nothing. That night, as rain pattered against the windows, Maxwell sat beside the twins' cribs, holding their tiny hands. "I don't know what to do," he whispered. "I'm trying. I swear I'm trying." Tears slid down his cheeks as he hummed a lullaby Jennifer used to sing. The babies continued to cry, their faces red with exhaustion. Eventually, he dozed off in the rocking chair, the sound of their sobs invading even his dreams. Morning arrived with no relief. The twins' personal pediatrician, Dr. Wilson, made another house call, examining them meticulously before delivering the same verdict. "Physically, they're developing normally. This is emotional, Mr. Bennett. Children this young sense absence. Profoundly, they're grieving in the only way they know how." Maxwell nodded mechanically. "What about the medication?" "We could adjust the dosage, but honestly, what they need can't be prescribed. They need emotional stability, connection, security. Perhaps consider a long-term live-in caregiver rather than rotating nannies." After the doctor left, Maxwell instructed his assistant to contact the most exclusive staffing agencies again. Meanwhile, Mrs. Rivera, the housekeeper who had worked for the family for years, did her best to help, but even her familiar presence couldn't soothe the twins. Outside the mansion, a city maintenance crew had arrived to clean the neighborhood streets. Among them was Eleanor Walsh, a 34-year-old woman with kind eyes and calloused hands. Unlike her co-workers who wore earbuds to drown out the world, Eleanor worked in attentive silence. When the baby's cries reached her ears through an open window, she paused, listening intently. "Those poor little things," she murmured. Then, almost instinctively, she began to sing. It wasn't a conventional lullaby, but a simple melody her grandmother had taught her, with words about starlight and gentle breezes. Her voice carried softly through the morning air, floating through the open window. Inside the nursery, something miraculous happened. The twins' cries began to diminish. First Sophia, then Olivia, their sobs transitioning to whimpers, then to curious silence. Maxwell, who had been on a video call with his company executives, noticed the sudden quiet and rushed to check on them. He found both babies staring toward the window, their eyes wide and attentive, tears still wet on their cheeks but no longer falling. Confused, Maxwell approached the window. Below, he saw a woman in a city maintenance uniform, sweeping debris while singing quietly. He watched incredulous as his daughters remained calm for the first time in months. When the woman moved further down the street and her voice faded, the twins began fussing again. Without thinking, Maxwell raced downstairs and out the front gate. "Excuse me," he called out, startling Eleanor, who turned with her broom still in hand. "You were singing just now." Eleanor nodded cautiously. "I'm sorry if I was disturbing." "No, please, my daughters. They stopped crying when they heard you. They haven't stopped crying in months." Eleanor's expression softened with understanding. "I heard them. That kind of cry isn't physical pain, it's emotional." "How did you know that?" "I volunteer at a community daycare on weekends. I've worked with all kinds of children. Sometimes what they need most is just the right kind of presence." Maxwell studied her, this woman in worn work boots and a uniform patched at the elbows. Nothing like the polished nannies and specialists who had paraded through his home. Would you be willing to come in, just for a moment?" Eleanor hesitated, glancing at her work truck where her supervisor was checking his clipboard. "I'm on shift until 4. I'll speak with your supervisor. Please, I'll compensate you for your time. It's just, they finally stopped crying." Something in his desperate plea moved her. Eleanor radioed her supervisor, explaining the situation. After some negotiation, and Maxwell's insistence that it was an emergency involving children, she was granted a break. As Eleanor followed Maxwell into the mansion, she didn't gawk at the marble foyer or the crystal chandelier. Instead, her attention focused immediately on the sound of the twins beginning to cry again. Maxwell led her upstairs to the nursery, where Mrs. Rivera was attempting to calm them. "May I?" Eleanor asked, approaching the cribs. Mrs. Rivera looked questioningly at Maxwell, who nodded. Eleanor gently picked up Sophia, then gestured for Mrs. Rivera to hand her Olivia as well. With practiced ease, she cradled both babies against her chest and began singing the same melody as before. The effect was immediate. The twins quieted, their tiny bodies relaxing against her. Eleanor swayed slightly, her voice soft and soothing. Maxwell and Mrs. Rivera watched in astonishment as both babies drifted to sleep within minutes. "How did you do that?" Maxwell whispered, afraid to break the spell. Eleanor carefully placed the sleeping infants in their cribs. Sometimes children need more than comfort. They need someone who understands their pain without trying to fix it. She gently stroked Olivia's cheek. "They're beautiful girls. They look like they've been through a lot." "They have," Maxwell replied, his voice catching. "We all have." As Eleanor prepared to leave, promising to return after her shift, Maxwell stood at the nursery door watching his peacefully sleeping daughters. For the first time since losing Jennifer, he felt a flicker of hope. Not happiness, not yet, but the possibility that someday this house might know peace again. What he couldn't know was that Eleanor had her own complicated past, secrets she kept carefully guarded, and that her entrance into their lives would change everything, for better and worse in ways none of them could imagine. A new presence. Eleanor returned to the Bennett mansion that evening as promised. She found Maxwell pacing in the living room, phone pressed to his ear, discussing some urgent business matter. When he saw her, relief washed over his face. He quickly ended the call and led her upstairs, where the twins had just begun their evening crying ritual. Over the next few hours, Eleanor demonstrated a natural ability with the babies that bordered on magical. She bathed them with gentle efficiency, prepared their bottles with precise attention to temperature, and sang them to sleep with that same haunting melody. Maxwell observed from the doorway, his expression a mixture of gratitude and bewilderment. "Where did you learn to do all this?" he asked as they descended the stairs after the twins were finally asleep. Eleanor smiled modestly. "My mother raised 6 children on her own while working 2 jobs. I was the oldest, so I became a second mother by necessity. Then I worked at daycares through college, and now I volunteer weekends at a community center in my neighborhood." "College?" Maxwell asked, unable to hide his surprise. Early childhood education and psychology. I graduated with honors from State University. She noted his expression and added with a slight edge, People who clean streets can have degrees, Mr. Bennett. Maxwell flushed. I didn't mean, I'm sorry, it's just, you're so skilled with children. Why aren't you working in your field? Eleanor's eyes clouded. Life takes unexpected turns sometimes. The maintenance job offers benefits and stability. She glanced at her watch. I should go. My bus leaves in 20 minutes. I'll have my driver take you home, Maxwell insisted, already reaching for his phone. That's not necessary. Please, he said. It's the least I can do after today. In the quiet of his study after Eleanor left, Maxwell contemplated the remarkable change in his household. For the first time in months, the twins were sleeping peacefully. Mrs. Rivera had looked almost shocked when she checked on them, commenting that it was like a miracle. The next morning, Maxwell made a decision. When Eleanor arrived for her shift with the city maintenance crew, he was waiting at the gate. I have a proposition for you, he said without preamble. I'd like to hire you as a full-time caregiver for my daughters. Eleanor adjusted her work gloves. Mr. Bennett, I appreciate the offer, but I have a job. I'll double whatever they're paying you, triple it. She smiled sadly. It's not just about money. I have responsibilities, colleagues who depend on me. Please, Maxwell said, the word foreign on his tongue, a man accustomed to commanding, rather than pleading. My daughters need you. You saw them yesterday. Nothing has worked until you came along. Eleanor studied his face, the dark circles under his eyes, the grief etched into premature lines. Let me think about it, she finally said. 3 days later, after careful consideration and conversations with her supervisor and mother, Eleanor arrived at the Bennett mansion with a small suitcase. Mrs. Rivera showed her to a spacious bedroom, with its own bathroom on the same floor as the nursery. Mr. Bennett said to give you whatever you need, the housekeeper explained, her tone respectful but cautious. He's in meetings until dinner, but asked that you feel at home. Eleanor thanked her and spent the afternoon familiarizing herself with the twins' schedule and preferences. She discovered that Sophia liked to be held with her head resting on Eleanor's left shoulder, while Olivia preferred to be cradled in arms. She learned which stuffed animals comforted them and which songs made them giggle. By the time Maxwell returned home, Eleanor had transformed the nursery atmosphere. The twins sat contentedly in a play area she had created, surrounded by sensory toys. The room smelled of lavender and chamomile from the essential oil diffuser she had brought with her. This is different, Maxwell observed, loosening his tie as he entered. Children respond to their environment, Eleanor explained. The nursery was beautiful but sterile. They need warmth, texture, gentle stimulation. Over dinner that night, served in the formal dining room that could seat 20 but only held the two of them at opposite ends of a massive table, Maxwell awkwardly attempted conversation. This is ridiculous, Eleanor finally said, picking up her plate. Do you mind if we sit closer? I can barely hear you. Maxwell blinked in surprise but nodded, and they relocated to the kitchen island where Mrs. Rivera had left covered dishes keeping warm. The informality seemed to release something in Maxwell. He spoke about his company, about the challenges of balancing work and fatherhood. Eleanor listened attentively, offering occasional insights about child development that impressed him. As weeks passed, a routine developed. Eleanor devoted her days to the twins, implementing a consistent schedule that gradually reduced their fussiness. Maxwell found himself coming home earlier, drawn by the peaceful atmosphere that now permeated the house. Sometimes he would pause outside the nursery, listening as Eleanor read stories or sang lullabies, her voice creating a sanctuary of calm. One evening, he found her in the family room with both twins asleep on a blanket beside her while she mended. "Third torn baby dress by hand. We have people who can do that," he said, sitting across from her. "I know, but I enjoy it." She tied off a neat stitch. "How was your day?" "Complicated. The European markets are volatile, and our new security protocol has unexpected bugs." He ran a hand through his hair. "I'm sorry. You don't want to hear about financial software. Why wouldn't I?" Eleanor looked up from her sewing. "I'm interested in what you do." That simple statement, the genuine interest in her eyes, cracked something in Maxwell's carefully maintained facade. He found himself explaining the intricacies of his work, the pressure of protecting billions in assets, the weight of responsibility to clients and employees. Eleanor listened without judgment, asking thoughtful questions that surprised him with their insight. When Olivia stirred and began to fuss, Eleanor scooped her up with practiced ease. "Would you like to hold her?" she asked Maxwell. "She's just looking for comfort, not hungry yet." Maxwell hesitated, then carefully took his daughter. Under Eleanor's gentle guidance, he adjusted his hold, cradling Olivia against his chest the way she preferred. The baby settled immediately, her tiny hand clutching his finger. "She knows you," Eleanor said softly. "Even when you're not here. Physically, they sense your presence in this house. Children are incredibly perceptive." "I haven't been present enough," Maxwell admitted, studying his daughter's perfect features. "Even before Jennifer passed, I was always working, building the company, securing our future. I thought I had time to be a father later." "You're being a father now," Eleanor assured him. "That's what matters." As summer turned to fall, the household settled into a harmonious rhythm. The twins began reaching developmental milestones, sitting up, babbling their first syllables, showing distinct personalities. Eleanor documented everything in a journal she kept for Maxwell, complete with photos she took on her modest smartphone. Mrs. Rivera, initially wary of Eleanor's role in the household, gradually warmed to her presence. "The house feels alive." "Again," she confided one afternoon while they folded laundry together. "Mr. Bennett smiles now. Before you came, I wasn't sure he ever would again." Eleanor had become more than a caregiver. She attended pediatrician appointments, researched developmental activities, and even accompanied Maxwell to a company picnic where the twins were introduced to his employees for the first time. Photographs from that day, Maxwell holding Sophia, while Eleanor held Olivia, all four smiling in the sunshine, were framed and placed throughout the house. One rainy evening, after the twins were asleep, Maxwell found Eleanor in the library researching preschool options on her laptop. "They won't need preschool for years," he said, amused. "The best ones have waiting lists that start at birth," she replied without looking up. "We're already behind." The sea. Casual "we" hung in the air between them. Eleanor glanced up, suddenly self-conscious, but Maxwell was smiling. "I'm glad you're thinking long-term," he said, sitting beside her on the sofa. "I've been meaning to talk to you about that, actually. About your position here." Eleanor tensed. "Is there a problem with my work?" "The opposite." Maxwell turned to face her fully. "You've transformed this house, Eleanor. The twins are thriving because of you." He paused, searching for words. "I'm functioning again because of you." She closed her laptop. "I'm just doing my job." "No," he shook his head firmly. "What you've given us goes far beyond employment. You've created a home where there was only an empty house." He took a deep breath. "I'd like to offer you a permanent position. Not as an employee, but as part of this family." Eleanor's eyes widened as she realized what he was suggesting. "Maxwell," just before she could respond, the doorbell rang, echoing through the house. Mrs. Rivera had already gone home for the evening, so Maxwell excused himself to answer it. From the library, Eleanor heard raised voices, then Maxwell's tense greeting. Moments later, he returned, his expression tight. Behind him walked a tall, elegantly dressed woman whose resemblance to the photos of Jennifer Bennett was unmistakable. "This is Victoria Hammond," Maxwell said stiffly. "Jennifer's sister. She's just flown in from Paris." Victoria surveyed Eleanor with cool assessment. "So you're the miracle worker I've been hearing about, the street cleaner who's managed to infiltrate my sister's home." Eleanor stood, extending her hand professionally. "It's nice to meet you, Ms. Hammond. The twins have your sister's eyes." Victoria ignored the outstretched hand. "Maxwell, we need to talk, privately." As Eleanor excused herself to check on the babies, she felt Victoria's critical gaze following her. Whatever conversation had been building between her and Maxwell would have to wait. The temporary peace of their household had just been disrupted by a storm in designer heels, and Eleanor sensed this was only the beginning. Shadows of the past Victoria Hammond's arrival transformed the Bennett mansion overnight. Designer luggage occupied the guest suite, expensive perfume lingered in the hallways, and tense whispers filled rooms that had recently known peace. She moved through the house with proprietary confidence, rearranging photographs, inspecting closets, and questioning every aspect of the twins' care. Jennifer would have wanted them in organic cotton only, she declared, examining the baby's clothing. And these toys, too much plastic. My sister was very particular about environmental toxins. Eleanor maintained professional composure, adapting to Victoria's demands while protecting the twins' routine. When Victoria insisted on a new feeding schedule based on a European parenting philosophy, Eleanor respectfully provided research supporting their current approach. When Victoria criticized the twins' playroom setup, Eleanor invited her to participate in their developmental activities rather than change them. Maxwell watched this subtle power struggle with increasing discomfort. In business, he never hesitated to take control of difficult situations, but this conflict between his sister-in-law and the woman who had become essential to his family left him uncharacteristically indecisive. 1. Afternoon, Eleanor overheard Victoria in Maxwell's study, her voice sharp with accusation. Have you even vetted this woman properly? Anyone can claim childcare experience. She was picking up trash on the street when you met her, Maxwell. She has degrees in early childhood education and psychology, Maxwell responded. And regardless of her background, she's exceptional with the girls. That's not enough, Victoria's voice rose. Jennifer would be horrified to know you've entrusted her babies to a complete stranger without thorough investigation. What do you really know about her past? Eleanor quietly retreated to the nursery, her hands trembling slightly as she organized the twins' clothes. Victoria's questions weren't entirely unfair. There were chapters of her life she hadn't shared. With Maxwell, painful parts she preferred to keep private. Not lies, but carefully guarded truths. That evening, Victoria insisted on a formal dinner like old times, complete with the housekeeper serving as waitstaff. Eleanor offered to stay with the twins, but Victoria countered, Mrs. Rivera can monitor the babies. We have a nanny cam system. I think it's important we all dine together as a family. The emphasis on family carried an unmistakable message. Eleanor was staff, not family. Maxwell looked like he wanted to object, but remained silent. Dinner was an exercise in subtle hostility. Victoria dominated the conversation with stories about her international fashion career and reminiscences about Jennifer that pointedly excluded Eleanor. When Eleanor mentioned the twins' recent developmental progress, Victoria smoothly changed the subject. So, Eleanor, Victoria said during dessert, swirling expensive wine in her crystal glass. Tell us about your family. Do they all work in municipal services? My mother is a retired nurse's aide, Eleanor answered calmly. She raised 6 children on her own after my father left. All of my siblings graduated college. One is a teacher, another a physical therapist. How impressive. And before working for the city? Maxwell mentioned you were quite accomplished academically. Eleanor took a measured breath. I worked for a private childcare center for several years after college. Yet you left that career for street cleaning. Victoria's perfectly shaped eyebrow arched. Seems an unusual choice. Life takes unexpected turns, Eleanor replied, the same phrase. She'd offered Maxwell months ago. Indeed it does, Victoria smiled without warmth, particularly when those turns involve legal complications. The table fell silent. Maxwell set down his fork. Victoria, that's enough. Is it? Victoria placed her napkin beside her plate. Because I took the liberty of conducting the background. Check you should have done months ago. She reached for her designer handbag and extracted a thin folder. Eleanor Walsh isn't just a humble city worker with a psychology degree. She has quite an interesting history. Eleanor's face remained composed, but her knuckles whitened around her water glass. Mr. Bennett is my employer. If there's anything in my past you believe he should know, I'm happy to discuss it with him privately. Oh, I think privacy has been part of the problem, Victoria replied. Maxwell, did you know that Eleanor was married to a man named Daniel Reeves, a financial advisor who was convicted of securities fraud and wire fraud 5 years ago? Maxwell's eyes darted to Eleanor, who sat perfectly still. He's currently serving 8 years in federal prison, Victoria continued. And while Eleanor herself was never charged, she was investigated extensively. Fascinating reading, really. She slid the folder toward Maxwell. There's more. After her husband's conviction, Eleanor was pregnant. The child was born while Reeves was awaiting sentencing. Stop. Eleanor's voice was quiet but firm. This isn't appropriate dinner conversation. Where is that child now, Eleanor? Victoria pressed. Because there's no mention of a child in your employment paperwork. Eleanor stood abruptly. Excuse me, I need to check on the twins. After she left, Maxwell turned to Victoria. Was that necessary? To ambush her like this? Necessary? Maxwell, she's hiding a criminal past and has mysterious gaps in her personal history. She's working in your home, with your children, after being married to a financial criminal. Given your own business, have you considered she might have ulterior motives? Maxwell opened the folder reluctantly. Inside were news clippings about Daniel Reeves's conviction for a Ponzi scheme that had cost investors millions, court documents showing Eleanor had been questioned extensively during the investigation, and records indicating she had given birth to a son named Ethan James Walsh. The next morning, Eleanor found Maxwell in his study, the contents of Victoria's folder spread across his desk. His face was drawn from a sleepless night. You should have told me, he said without preamble. Eleanor closed the door behind her. Yes, I should have. Why didn't you? Because people make assumptions. She remained standing, hands clasped, before her. They hear convicted fraudster's wife and immediately think I must have known, must have participated, must be guilty too. They don't consider that I might have been another victim. Maxwell gestured to the chair across from him. Tell me everything now. Eleanor sat, her posture straight but her eyes revealing vulnerability for the first time since he'd known her. I met Daniel when I was working at a private preschool where his niece was enrolled. He was charming, successful, generous. We dated for a year and married quickly. I had no reason to suspect his investment business wasn't legitimate. She took a steadying breath. 2 years into our marriage, the FBI raided our home at dawn. I watched them take his computers, files, everything. Within hours, my life imploded. Our assets were frozen, friends disappeared. I was interrogated repeatedly, even though I had nothing to do with his business. The investigation says you handled some client communications, Maxwell noted, tapping a document. I occasionally answered phones or greeted clients at events. I never had any financial role. Eleanor's voice remained even. I was cleared completely, but mudsticks, Mr. Bennett. My reputation was destroyed by association. The preschool asked me to resign. No childcare facility would hire someone connected to a financial scandal. And your son? Maxwell asked quietly. Pain flashed across Eleanor's face. I discovered I was pregnant during Daniel's trial. He was convicted while I was in my second trimester. By then, I had no job, no home, no support system, except my mother's already overcrowded house. She swallowed hard. After Ethan was born, I couldn't provide the life he deserved. I made the most difficult decision a mother can make. You gave him up for adoption, Maxwell said, his tone softening. Eleanor nodded, tears finally breaking through her composure. To a wonderful couple, a pediatric nurse and a teacher who couldn't have children. It was an open adoption. I receive updates and photos. He's happy, healthy, loved. Why didn't you tell me any of this when I hired you? Would you have hired me if you'd known? Eleanor asked simply. A woman whose husband committed financial crimes, who gave up her child? Or would you have seen me as damaged goods, a potential liability? I needed this job, not just for the money, but because working with children is what I was born to do. Your daughters needed me. I didn't want my past to prevent me from helping them. Maxwell stood and walked to the window, processing everything. Victoria thinks you might have targeted this household deliberately, that you could be planning something. Eleanor laughed hollowly. Yes, my master plan. To work 16-hour days caring for infants, changing diapers and singing lullabies, all for some elaborate revenge against the financial sector. She shook her head. I was driving to my city maintenance job when I heard, "Your daughter's crying. That's the entire conspiracy." "She's having you investigated further," Maxwell admitted. "She's hired someone." "I have nothing to hide beyond what I've just told you." Eleanor stood, smoothing her simple dress. "But if my presence here is no longer welcome, I understand. I can pack my things today." For several long moments, Maxwell said nothing. Eleanor had begun to turn toward the door when he finally spoke. "The twins adore you. This household functions because of you." He faced her directly. "But I need to know I can trust you completely, Eleanor. No more secrets." "No more secrets," she agreed quietly. The fragile peace that followed was short-lived. Victoria's private investigator continued digging into Eleanor's past, interviewing former colleagues, neighbors, even distant relatives. Each day brought new questions, new insinuations. Though Maxwell attempted to shield Eleanor from the worst of it, the tension in the house became unbearable. 2 weeks after Victoria's arrival, Eleanor was giving the twins their evening bath. When Maxwell appeared in the doorway, his expression grim. "Victoria's investigator found something else," he said, "about Daniel Reeves." Eleanor carefully wrapped Sophia in a towel before answering. "What about him?" "He apparently tried to contact you multiple times from prison. There are records of declined calls, returned letters." "Yes." Eleanor nodded, focusing on drying. Sophia's tiny fingers. "He tried, I refused." "Why?" "Because he destroyed lives, Maxwell, including mine." Her eyes met his. "I have nothing to say to him." "Victoria thinks—" "I don't care what Victoria thinks," Eleanor interrupted, her patience finally breaking. "She's been determined to find fault with me from the moment she arrived. Nothing I say or do will change that, because this isn't about me. It's about her grief and guilt." Maxwell looked startled. "What do you mean?" "She wasn't here when Jennifer passed. She wasn't here for the funeral, for your grief, for the twins' first months. Now she's overcompensating, trying to prove her devotion to her sister's memory by protecting the family from imagined threats." Eleanor placed Sophia in her crib and reached for Olivia. "I understand grief, Maxwell. I've lived with plenty of my own, but I won't be its collateral damage anymore." That night, after the twins were asleep, Eleanor found Victoria waiting in her bedroom. "I know what you're doing," Victoria said, examining a framed photo of Ethan that Eleanor kept on her nightstand. "Working your way into this family, making yourself indispensable. It's quite clever, really." "I'm simply doing my job," Eleanor replied, too exhausted for confrontation. "A convicted fraudster's wife just happens to find employment with one of the country's leading financial technology entrepreneurs?" Victoria set down the photo. "You expect anyone to believe that's coincidence. Believe what you want, Ms. Hammond." Victoria stepped closer. "Here's what I believe. I believe you've manipulated my grieving brother-in-law and my sister's children. I believe you've hidden your past because it reveals your true character. And I believe you should leave this house before you cause more damage." Eleanor met her, gaze steadily. "With all due respect, that's not your decision to make." "Perhaps not directly," Victoria smiled coldly. "But Maxwell values my sister's memory and my judgment. When presented with all the facts, he'll make the right choice." After Victoria left, Eleanor sat on the edge of her bed, finally allowing tears to fall. She'd known this moment might come, when her past caught up to her, when the life she'd carefully rebuilt began to crumble. She'd seen it in Maxwell's eyes today. Doubt, uncertainty, the beginning of mistrust. With shaking hands, she opened her laptop and began typing a resignation letter. Whatever her feelings for Maxwell and the twins had become, and they had become something far beyond professional, she couldn't subject them to the continued turmoil of her complicated history. Victoria was right about one thing. The Bennett family had already experienced enough pain. Eleanor printed the letter and placed it in an envelope. Tomorrow, she would give it to Maxwell and walk away from another life she had come to love. As she prepared for bed, her phone chimed with a text message from an unfamiliar number. Ms. Walsh, this is Roy Daniels, private investigator working for Victoria Hammond. I've uncovered information about your son's adoption that you should know. Please call me urgently. Eleanor stared at the message, her heart racing. What could he possibly have found? The adoption had been handled legally, ethically, unless Victoria was now targeting Ethan in her determination to remove Eleanor from the Bennett household. That possibility ignited something fierce in Eleanor. She had sacrificed everything for her son's well-being once before. She would not allow him to become collateral damage in Victoria's vendetta. With newfound resolve, she tore up the resignation letter and began planning her defense. Hearts reunited. Dawn broke over the Bennett estate as Eleanor paced her room, phone clutched in her hand. After a sleepless night, she had decided to confront the investigator directly. She dialed the number from the text message. Mr. Daniels, this is Eleanor Walsh. You contacted me about my son. Ms. Walsh, thank you for calling. His voice was unexpectedly kind. I need to be clear. I work for Ms. Hammond, but I have ethical boundaries. What I've discovered concerns me professionally. Eleanor's grip tightened on the phone. What exactly have you found? Ms. Hammond asked me to investigate your son's adoption, presumably looking for irregularities. There were none. It was conducted properly through reputable channels. He paused. However, I uncovered evidence that Ms. Hammond has contacted your son's adoptive parents directly, suggesting they should be concerned about your involvement with the Bennett family. The room seemed to spin around Eleanor. She did what? She implied that your connection to the Bennetts could bring unwanted media attention to them and the child. She offered financial assistance if they would agree to terminate the open adoption arrangement. Eleanor sat heavily on the edge of her bed. That's manipulation, possibly illegal. I agree, which is why I'm informing you. I've also submitted my resignation to Ms. Hammond. I won't be part of separating a birth mother from contact with her child. After thanking the investigator, Eleanor sat motionless, processing this information. Victoria's vendetta had crossed a line she couldn't ignore. It was time to stop retreating and start fighting, not just for her position in the Bennett household, but for her dignity and her right to a relationship with her son. She dressed quickly and headed to Maxwell's study, finding him already at his desk reviewing documents. His tired eyes suggested he'd had as little sleep as she had. We need to talk, Eleanor said, closing the door firmly behind her. If it's about your resignation, I'm not resigning. She sat across from him, shoulders straight. But there's something you should know about your sister-in-law. Eleanor explained the investigator's call, watching Maxwell's expression shift from surprise to disbelief to anger. That can't be true, he said, but his tone lacked conviction. Call him yourself. Eleanor slid the investigator's number across the desk. Victoria isn't protecting your family, Maxwell. She's punishing me for filling a void she feels guilty about leaving. Maxwell rubbed his temples. This has gone too far. Yes, it has. Eleanor leaned forward. I've accepted judgment for my past. I've tolerated suspicion and hostility, but I will not allow anyone to threaten my relationship with my son. Of course not. Maxwell stood abruptly. Wait here. He left the study, returning minutes later with Victoria, who entered with cool composure until she saw Eleanor. Family meeting, Maxwell. How democratic of you. Sit down, Victoria. Maxwell's tone carried an authority Eleanor had rarely heard him use. Did you contact Eleanor's son's adoptive parents? Victoria's momentary hesitation confirmed the truth before she spoke. I was protecting this family from potential scandal. By threatening a 5-year-old child's relationship with his birth mother? Maxwell's voice rose. By interfering in a legal adoption arrangement? Don't be dramatic. I simply made them aware of potential complications and offered assistance. Victoria adjusted her silk scarf. They deserve to know who has access to their child. They already know exactly who I am, Eleanor said quietly. We have a relationship built on trust and transparency, something you wouldn't understand. Victoria turned to Maxwell. Are you really going to take her word over mine? Jennifer would be appalled. Don't. Maxwell cut her off sharply. Don't use my wife to justify this. Jennifer valued honesty above all else. She would be horrified by what you've done. I've done everything to protect her daughters. This woman is an intruder in your life, in Jennifer's home. This woman, Maxwell interrupted, has brought healing to this household when nothing else could. She's given the twins stability, security, and love. She's helped me become a better father. He took a deep breath. And despite your efforts to paint her as some kind of opportunist, all evidence points to someone who has overcome tremendous adversity with grace and integrity. Victoria stood, straightening her designer dress. I see I've wasted my time and concern. I'll be returning to Paris this afternoon. That would be best, Maxwell agreed. But before you go, you will call Eleanor's son's adoptive parents and retract everything you said. You will apologize for your interference, and you will do it now, in my presence. The conversation that followed was tense but conclusive. Victoria, realizing the extent of her overreach, made the call. Afterward, she departed without further confrontation, leaving a household exhaling in collective relief. That evening, Maxwell found Eleanor in the garden, watching the sunset from a stone bench. He sat beside her, maintaining a respectful distance. I owe you an apology, he said. I should have trusted you. I should have defended you from the beginning. Eleanor turned to him. You were protecting your daughters, I understand that. Still, I let doubt creep in when I had seen the evidence of your character every day for months. He shifted to face her directly. The investigator sent me his full report before he resigned. He found something Victoria didn't share with us. Eleanor tensed. What? Records showing you reported your ex-husband's suspicious activities to the SEC 6 months before his arrest. Maxwell's expression softened. You tried to stop him, Eleanor, at great personal risk. She looked away. It wasn't enough. People still lost everything. But you tried, and then you lost everything too. He reached for her hand cautiously. I'm sorry I doubted you. Eleanor accepted his hand, feeling the gentle pressure of his fingers around hers. Where do we go from here? That depends. Maxwell's voice grew hesitant. Before Victoria arrived, I was about to ask you something important. Inside the house, a baby's cry broke the moment. Eleanor smiled. Duty calls. Together they returned to the nursery where both twins were awake, standing in their cribs and reaching out as soon as they saw Eleanor. She lifted Olivia while Maxwell took Sophia, the four of them creating a picture of domestic harmony that would have seemed impossible months ago. As autumn turned to winter, the Bennett household settled into a new normal. Eleanor's position evolved from employee to partner in every sense. Maxwell formally proposed on Christmas Eve, presenting a ring not of ostentatious diamonds, but a simple emerald that matched her eyes. I want to build something real, he told her. Something based on who we are now, not who we were before. They were married in the garden the following spring with the twins, now toddling and babbling, serving as flower girls in their mother's arms. Mrs. Rivera beamed from the front row beside Eleanor's mother and siblings who had embraced Maxwell with warmth and acceptance. 2 months after the wedding, Eleanor received an email that changed everything. Ethan's adoptive parents, moved by the story of Eleanor's journey and impressed by her dedication to maintaining appropriate boundaries, suggested an in-person meeting. They want him to meet you, Maxwell said, reading the email over her shoulder. And they want to meet your new family. The meeting took place at a park halfway between their homes. Eleanor watched through tears as a dark-haired boy with her eyes and chin approached cautiously, holding his adoptive mother's hand. You're my first mom, he said simply, with the directness of a 5-year-old. Yes, Eleanor managed. I am. Mom and Dad said you couldn't take care of me when I was a baby, but you made sure I had a good family. Eleanor knelt to his level. That's right. I loved you so much that I wanted you to have everything I couldn't give you then. He considered, this with serious eyes. They said you have new babies now. They're not babies anymore. They're little girls a bit younger than you. Would you like to meet them? Ethan nodded, and Maxwell approached with the twins, who regarded their new acquaintance with fascination. Introductions were made between all parents, and an extraordinary afternoon unfolded. Two families connected by one remarkable woman, finding their way toward an expanded definition of family. As the years passed, the relationship flourished. Ethan became a regular visitor to the Bennett home, developing a special bond with his half-sisters and with Maxwell, who recognized in the boy's mathematical aptitude a kindred spirit. The adoptive parents, initially cautious, grew to appreciate the extended family their son had gained. Eleanor and Maxwell welcomed two more children of their own, a son and another daughter, creating a bustling household filled with the chaos and joy they had once thought impossible. Eleanor continued her education, eventually establishing a foundation supporting children of incarcerated parents, turning her painful past into purpose. On the twins' 10th birthday, as family and friends gathered to celebrate, Eleanor found a quiet moment with Maxwell on the same garden bench where they had once contemplated their uncertain future. "Did you ever imagine this?" she asked, gesturing toward the lawn where all 5 children played, where Ethan, now a teenager, helped the younger ones with a science experiment, where her mother chatted with Mrs. Rivera like old friends. "Never," Maxwell admitted, his arm around her shoulders. "After Jennifer passed, I thought our story was over. I was just trying to survive each day." He kissed her temple. "I didn't understand that sometimes the most beautiful chapters come after what feels like an ending." Eleanor leaned into his embrace, watching as the setting sun painted their expansive family in golden light. The journey from street cleaner to this moment had been neither direct nor easy. There had been doubts, judgments, painful revelations, and difficult reconciliations. But through it all, she had followed her instinct to nurture, to heal, to love without reservation. "Mom, Dad, come see what Ethan taught us," called one of the twins, waving excitedly. Maxwell stood, offering his hand to his wife. "Shall we?" Eleanor took his hand, rising to join the family they had built together. A family founded not on perfect pasts or conventional beginnings, but on the simple truth that love, when given the chance to take root and grow, can transform the most unlikely circumstances into something miraculous. As they walked toward their children, Eleanor reflected on the melody she had sung outside the mansion gates years ago, a simple tune that had somehow opened a door to possibilities neither of them could have imagined. That door had led not to a fairy tale, but to something far more valuable, a real family with all its complexities, challenges, and immeasurable joys. And in that authenticity lay the true magic of their story. Dear listeners, we hope Eleanor and Maxwell's journey has touched your hearts. Sometimes life's most beautiful chapters begin after what feels like an ending, as we've seen in this remarkable tale of healing and second chances. If you found yourself moved by their story, please remember to subscribe to our channel and like this video to help us continue sharing these powerful narratives. We've created a special playlist of similar heartwarming stories about unlikely families finding their way to love. You'll find it by clicking to the left. What moment in Eleanor and Maxwell's journey resonated most with you? Perhaps it was when the twins first stopped crying at the sound of Eleanor's voice, or when Maxwell finally stood up for the family they were building together. Share your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one and love connecting with you through these stories of transformation and hope. Until next time, remember